that I'd take this one. He's like, oh, you got a lot of pressure on you. You got the Father's Day lesson. I said, oh, yeah. Forgot it was Father's Day. So, this lesson has nothing to do with that. It's been something I've been thinking about, and I've been working on very slowly in my mind, and I was like, oh, well, if there's time to get it done, it's put myself on a clock, I guess. So, and if anything, I would probably say that I probably should have done this on Mother's Day, because this is a topic of something that my mother loves very much. It's the topic of a lighthouse. And the song we sang before the lesson, thank you so much, Paul, I was reading it the other day, and I was thinking about it and what it's talking about. And so, for my brief introduction here, I'd like to tell you the story behind that hymn. We're not going to analyze that hymn or anything. We're going to be talking about being a lighthouse today. But this story kind of reflects some of the thoughts this morning. D.L. Moody was a evangelical in the 1800s that did a lot of meetings and ended up being a good friend of Philip Bliss, whose name you probably see a lot of times in our songbook. He was the one who wrote the song we just sang. One time he was a meeting in Ohio, actually, and he retells the story of a shipwreck that was in Lake Erie and that was trying to approach the harbor of Cleveland. As the ship approaches the harbor, the captain noticed that there was only one light as they were drawing near, and that was the light of the lighthouse. And he asked the pilot if he was quite sure that this was the Cleveland harbor, as there should be more lights there than just the one, as they were entering the harbor mouth. The pilot replied he was quite sure. And the captain inquired, "Where are the lower lights?" The pilot replied, "Gone out, sir." The captain then asked the pilot, "Can you make it to the harbor?" In which the pilot answered, "We must, sir, or perish." Bravely the old man steered the vessel upon her course towards safety, but alas, in the darkness of the harbor mouth, he missed the channel. The ship was struck upon many rocks, and in the stormy waters many lives were lost. This was the story that Moody had spoken in a meeting, and one of the members of the audience was Philip Bliss, and shortly after he had concluded, Philip Bliss had started penning down the words and setting it to music. Moody's final appeal to his group there was, "Brothers, the Master will take care of the great lighthouse, but let us keep the lower lights burning." That's what I want to talk to you about today, is us being a lighthouse. How are we a lighthouse? Well, let's take a look at what lighthouses are. Where are active lighthouses? Where do they serve their purpose? They serve it on the lights along the shore, along the water. It doesn't have to be the sea, as the story was recanted of Lake Erie, but they can also be along dangerous rivers, amidst islands. And the next question I ask is, are they able to accomplish their purpose elsewhere? Can a lighthouse serve anyone at all from the dangers that they warn of if they're in the middle of a field, or if they're in the middle of a forest? And I want to ask you, are you able to serve your purpose as a Christian if you're not where you ought to be? Yes, right now we are where we ought to be, but when we go out into the world, are we in places that would help us do our duty? And also, when is a lighthouse needed the most? The lighthouse is needed the most in the darkness. Before navigation and before GPS and automation, the lighthouse served as a guide to sailors in the dark looking to come ashore. And the thing is that we have that same purpose today. And there's a lot of verses that talk about light and darkness. So I'm going to share some today, share some thoughts, because really if you look at it, there's a lot of verses that contain light and darkness. So let's take a look at them. The first one this morning is 1 Thessalonians 5, 4 through 5. It says, "But you are not in darkness, brothers, for that day to surprise you like a thief, for you are all children of light, children of the day, and we are not of the night or of darkness." If you go and you open and you read some of the context in this section, the darkness he's referring to here is ignorance. He's writing to the Thessalonians because they have people there saying, "Oh, peace, peace, everything's going to be fine." And they're in darkness. They don't see the dangers that are ahead. And they're writing that saying, you are in the light because you know. You know what is coming. You are prepared. You are not going to be surprised. And think about how relevant that is to us today. We think about all those who say everything's just fine. Everyone that says, what's the big deal about doing X, Y, or Z? They're in the darkness. We should know better, and we should be in the light. Another one we have is John 3, 19 through 21. It says, "And this is the judgment, that light has come into the world, and people loved the darkness rather than the light because their works were evil. For anyone who does wicked things hates the light, it does not come to the light, lest his work should be exposed. But whoever does what is true comes to the light, so that it may be clearly seen that his works have been carried out in God." The world hates the light. There are many people who would be content in those dangerous waters without the light. But it doesn't shirk our responsibility. And the reason why people are happy in the darkness is because they like to think everything's okay. They don't want to have to change their life. They are comfortable in that darkness. The light exposes, but also it attracts. Because there may be a lot of ships at sea, but some are coming to shore, and they will need that light. So you may be thinking that your light is out there and that there is no one looking to come ashore, but there is. And you just have to make sure you're there for them. And this is where we need to work. We need to work in the darkness. That's where light is most effective. That we need to be out there, letting our light shine. And it's not easy work. It's not fun work. But it's necessary work. John 17, 15 through 18 says, "I do not ask that you take them out of the world, but that you keep them from the evil one. They are not of the world, just as I am not of the world. Sanctify them in truth. Your word is truth. As you sent me into the world, so have I sent them into the world." Here we have the truth. Here Jesus is talking about how he's sending those out into the world. Here we see that we have a necessary duty to be out into the world and be this light. To be ready, to be able to shine a light, to bring a path to those who are looking for it. It is not a fun job, as I said. Neither was maintaining a lighthouse. We'll talk about that in a little bit. But it's still a responsibility. It's a grave responsibility. We should reflect on our lives and ask ourselves, are we shining a light? Are we using every opportunity? I think about any place that I go, anything that I do, any people that I run across. Am I being a light to those people? They may not be looking, but that is not my job to determine that. I need to have the mindset that anyone I talk to, anywhere I go, anywhere I tread, that I'm being this light. That it's my responsibility to go out into the world to be the light. And as we are in a dark world, we also have a lot of things where we can be a light in many different ways. We can be an example to those we work with. We can talk to those that we are friends with. And the more we get involved, the older we get, the more organizations we have to join, whether for work or... I know my parents joined just about every organization there was in school so that they could see what I was doing. But it's still an opportunity. And you may not ever bring any of them. As I was talking about my new job with my uncle, we were talking about some things and about how to be a Christian in this world and in this environment, especially in, large companies. He said, you just hold true to what you do. And he said one day, now that he's retired, a guy came up to me that I've known for a while. And he said, I really didn't understand what you were about. But over time I saw that I now understand, and you're the real deal. You're sincere. He was that light. He was able to do that. It did not bring someone to him, but it exposed that person to the light. It exposed him to what is right. And we need to be able to do that as well. And if we have this bright shining light, and we're going to talk about that again as we talk about maintaining the lighthouse, we can be confident that we can be seen by those who are looking. John 1:5, and this is the NLT translation. I'm a big fan of the ESV, New American Standard, but I really like how this one was translated. It says, "The light shines in the darkness, and the darkness can never extinguish it." Where there is light, there is no darkness. The darkness wants to take over the light. But if you have light, the darkness will not overcome. So let's talk for just a minute about what is the job of a lighthouse. Well, I'd say the first job is to warn. And warning is not exactly a fun task. I think about Isaiah 13:9, and says, "Behold, the day of the Lord comes cruel with wrath and fierce anger to make the land a desolation and to destroy its sinners from it." Isaiah had a rough job. A job that I definitely don't want. Just had a phone call the other day. And I said, "How you doing, Jonathan?" I said, "I've been better. I've got some bad news." They went, "Oh, I hate bad news." I said, "I know. I don't like giving bad news either. But there is bad news that we do have to share with the world. That if they are wrong, that they will not be saved." I, personally, have a really tough time talking about serious things. I'm always shy and anxious about it. I'd much rather be talking about fun things. I had to tell, a very minute bad news to someone, and I panicked about it and called about 3 people before I had a 2-minute phone call to share some bad news. That's how I handle giving bad news. But it's still necessary. Not only is it necessary that we give this bad news, but it's commanded. Colossians 1:28, "Him we proclaim, warning everyone and teaching everyone with all wisdom, that we may present everyone mature in Christ." Our goal here is that we need to be teaching it to everyone, and that teaching comes with a warning. Here's what you need to do, but also, if you don't do it, there are consequences. And you may not see them, and you may want to turn your eye to them, but eventually you'll suffer that fate. Just like a lighthouse shows the path for wayward sailors, we are responsible to show the path for salvation. And that's our next point. A lighthouse saves. A lighthouse saves because it illuminates the dangers. And if you read some of the stories before the United States Coast Guard took over the Lighthouse Commission, which I read up on all the history of the lighthouse that was in the United States, that was pretty interesting. Have a nice read for yourself one day. But there would be those who manned the lighthouse that would risk their lives to save the sailors if they witnessed a shipwreck offshore. And we're talking 1800s. So there was no call to help, there was no backup coming. Just someone saw and they rescued him. And that's our job too, that we got to be there to illuminate the dangers, to help people avoid them, but also to be active in going and rescuing them. Mark 16:15-16 says, "And he said to them, Go into all the world and proclaim the gospel to the whole creation. Whoever believes it and is baptized will be saved, but whoever does not believe will be condemned." I really like this verse too because it kind of gives this example of the lighthouse. Some understanding that if a ship is trying to come on shore, a ship is sailing near the coast, and the lighthouse is illuminating the rocks, the lighthouse has done its job. That's the lighthouse's job. Here's where you are. Take that information and do with it what you want. So, if there are sailors who ignore that illumination, the path of the lighthouse, they'll be destined for disaster. And those who ignore the gospel being preached are destined for a disaster too. If we think about the story that I talked about, that Moody talked about, the reason why those people were headed for disaster is because the lighthouse and the lights weren't there. The path wasn't there. So if there's someone looking, we need to be there. We need to be there if everyone ignores it. When I was looking up lighthouses and trying to find pictures of lighthouses and things, I found this quote from George Bernard Shaw. He said, "I can think of no other edifice constructed by man as altruistic as a lighthouse. They were built only to serve." They weren't built to make a profit. They weren't built, as some tourist attraction, which most of them are now. They were built to serve and guide sailors. We also have a responsibility and a job to serve. It's our job to serve God and obey His will, and it's our job to serve fellow man as well. This means we are meant to be there for others, even if we're ignored, even if we're neglected. If we're still shining our light, that's what our responsibility is. That's what God wants us to do. So, let's take a couple minutes now and think about, how does a lighthouse work? Now, we are not going to get into the details of that, but even from ancient Egyptian times to now, there has been a source of light. That source of light has changed over the years for lighthouses. As technology has developed, things have gotten better. We went from wood to oil, and now apparently there's lasers that work lighthouses now, so lighthouses are suddenly becoming a lot cooler. But we have a source too. We have an important source. Our source hasn't changed, but it's still our source. We read James 1, verse 17, "Every good gift and every perfect gift is from above, coming down from the Father of lights, from whom there is no variation or shadow due to change." Our Father of lights. He is the light. Or we have John 1:5. 1 John 1:5. "This is the message we have heard from him and proclaimed to you, that God is light, and in him is no darkness at all." So He is light. He is this source, this unending light that we can have. It's not a fire that we have to keep going. It's not even a light switch that turns on and off. It's just always on. It's always there. It's always constant. It is like a lighthouse for us. It will always be there. And it should be our source of light as well. Another verse, Psalm 119 in the 130th verse, says, "The unfolding of your words gives light. It imparts understanding to the simple." Opening up His Word gives light. It gives light to us. It gives understanding to us what He'll have us to do, and it is our light that we can use, is that His Word is light. So what do we do with that light? What do we do with that Word? Are we opening that Word for that source? Then we have 2 Corinthians 4, verse 6. "For God, who said, 'Let light shine out of darkness,' has shone in our hearts to give the light of the knowledge of the glory of God in the face of Jesus Christ." Our light is the knowledge of Christ. There are many verses that talk about, if you've known Christ and you leave, how can you be saved? The reason for that is because you've rejected the light. Why would you come back to the light after you've left it? The light is a nice place. I think only just recently do I sleep in absolute darkness. For the longest time I had a TV running or something, some light on. Because light is comforting, right? Think of the phrase light at the end of the tunnel. We just keep going because we're drawn to that light. And if we think about the knowledge, well, that's at the end of our tunnel. That is what our light is. We have Luke 11, 33 through 36. It says, "No one after lighting a lamp puts it in the cellar or under a basket, but on a stand, so that those who may enter may see the light. Your eye is the lamp of your body. When your eye is healthy, your whole body is full of light. When it is bad, your body is full of darkness. Therefore be careful, lest the light in you be darkness. If then your whole body is full of light, having no part dark, it will be wholly bright, as when a lamp with its rays gives you light." Here Jesus is telling us that we need to be filled with this light. We need to be filled with this light so much that it provides this illumination for others, that there will be no darkness within it. So now we have our source. We should hopefully have this light inside of us, being filled with Christ. But that's not the last step. Much like the little fire or whatever the light source is that's used in the lighthouse isn't just that's all it is. There's a reflection. There's a series of mirrors and lenses in lighthouses that allow it to project it miles, hundreds of miles. And we too must reflect the light and not keep it in. The verse before, we're just talking about how if you're so full of it, you're going to be like the lamp in a dark room. So we have our scripture reading from this morning. "In the same way, let your light shine before others, so that they may see your good works and give glory to your Father who is in heaven." This is why our light's shining. And while there are many accounts of this discussion in the different Gospels, it boils down to the fact that Jesus is telling them that the light is meant to be seen. If you have light, show it. Don't hide it. There's no reason. You can also turn to Philippians 2, 14 through 16. It says, "Do all things without grumbling or disputing, that you may be blameless and innocent, children of God without blemish in the midst of a crooked and twisted generation, among whom you shine as lights in the world, holding fast to the word of life, so that in the day of Christ I may be proud that I did not run in vain or labor in vain." Couldn't we say today that we lived in a crooked and twisted generation? Here he's telling them that you're going to be lights in this world. And in this generation, there are going to be people who seek to discredit your light. That's why he's telling them, you need to be blameless. You are this light. You are this responsibility to show others. And when it comes down to it, when we do reflect our light, when we are showing it, we are shining it, this source that's in us, it is based on the actions that we take. That leads us to maintaining the light. Many of us probably haven't, dealt with having an oil lamp. I know, being nice here. But, I think about even being at camp, starting a fire was pretty easy, and nowadays I don't really do that, so I just have to think about turning a light switch on and off. But it did start as keeping a fire going constantly, and I remember my times as a Boy Scout where I would stay up all night making sure the fire was going, especially if I knew it was about to rain, so that we'd have some embers going for the next day. Well, as it was, putting more wood on the fire, it eventually changed to oil and other combustible materials, and even now the lasers. But back in the day, the people who manned the lighthouse had a pretty rough job. If you see this picture here, it's pretty dark because I wanted to make sure the words were pretty visible, but I found a lot of them, and lighthouses are oftentimes in isolated places because the light needs to be where there's no other light. So that meant that someone was living here maintaining this. And one of the things I read said it was like $200 a year to run the lighthouse in the 1800s. And maintaining the lighthouse had a lot more jobs. Not only did you have to gather the firewood or keep the oil filled, but you had to walk up that entire lighthouse. No elevators. The first elevator in a lighthouse was in 1966, just for you to know. So you had to spiral on up there, and you had to clean all the lenses. You had to clean all the mirrors because the fire that you were burning, the materials you were burning created soot that would go up onto the lenses and the mirrors, and you had to clean that off. And you would not see anyone else for days, and that would be your entire responsibility. You never knew if there was a ship coming or not. You just had to keep doing your job. And thinking about that, and it also makes me, think back to that passage in Psalm 119 where you open His Word and there's light. That's one of our responsibilities for maintaining light. But also, there are so many other things. There's so many other ways to make sure that we never let our light be dimmed. Now, this isn't a sermon about those, but it's something that I want you to consider. That we need to work constantly to make sure that the light is shining brightly. Because if we think about the story that I opened up with, or the words in the hymn that we sang before, there may be someone who's coming. There may be someone who's lost. And you can be that light. And if the lights aren't ready for those who are looking for them, is our light ready for those who are looking for the light to the path of salvation? And who knows who you might be able to save? This is a dark world, and this is where light has the biggest impact. So, at this time, as is our custom, we here have our lower lights burning for anyone who's looking for the path as we offer an invitation. And maybe you've let your light dim, and you need some help cleaning off the mirrors and lenses. We'd be happy to help. Please, let us know what you need. We'd be happy to help you and serve you as we stand and sing.